Put that coffee down.
I'm not here to waste your time, okay? I certainly hope you're not here to waste mine. So I'm gonna keep this short.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
The most valuable commodity I know of is information. Wouldn't you agree?
Coffee's for closers only.
Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the Behind Your Back podcast. You, my friend, you've made a wise choice in arriving here today. We've got a great show for you here. We got our friends Michael and Andy Goodman of Sherwood Lumber to guide us through some of the craziness that's happening, some recommendations with a little bit of historical context. I'm thrilled to share this episode with you. This episode, we're sponsored by Boise Cascade. They help you move faster and build stronger. They make it easier to get more done. And our friends at Materials Exchange, the LBM industry's answer to E-Trade. It is your digital marketplace for lumber and panels. So what do we talk about on the Behind Your Back podcast? Well, talk about leadership, personal productivity, time management, and the craft of selling in the construction industry. So in 1954, one Bernard Goodman founded Sherwood Lumber in the New York area. And in 1978, his son, second generation, Andy, took over and has run it for the last 40 plus years. And he joins us on the show here today. He's the president of Sherwood Lumber, Andy Goodman. Also is his son, Michael, Mike, Mikey. I don't know, whatever. If he has any other nicknames to go along with that, you'll hear a few of them on this podcast. So Mike Goodman leads these specialty products at Sherwood Lumber, and he's a super bright guy. He's got his MBA, he's got his JD. He also has his LLM, which is a little bit of trivia there. The LLM is like your PhD for the study of law. So there you go. I don't even know if you want to study more after that, where you go. I don't even know. Maybe he'll get his CPA someday. But anyway, Mike and Andy are super bright, and we talk a lot about some relevant topics for here today. We talk about forward pricing and risk management. That should be relevant to you. We talk about using data to think differently about risk. Sherwood Lumber is doing things differently when it comes to social media and branding and writing and sharing a lot of their insights as thought leaders that I think is extremely valuable. So I'm excited to share my conversation with Mike Goodman and Andy Goodman of Sherwood Lumber. As always, thank you for listening. So Mr. Andy Goodman, Mike Goodman, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you guys making time. If only there was anything interesting to talk about in the lumber market, but I don't know. We'll figure something out to talk about. No, very timely for you guys to join the show, and I really appreciate you making time. We're going to have fun here. We're going to start off with what we call our first four. Mike, heads up, I'm coming at you first, okay? Do you remember the first music album you either purchased or received?
Wow, it's a great question. Brings back a lot of memories. I remember it being Green Day.
Oh.
Remember that band? And the name of the album was Dookie.
Dookie.
I think it was their first album, and I was 11 at the time, maybe something like that, 10.
All right, let me see if my recollection of when that came into my life. I want to think 92, 93. Does that smell about right? Kind of right in there.
I was 10 in 93, so that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, all right, yep. I remember Green Day, Dookie for sure. All right, Andy, do you remember the first concert that you attended?
Yeah, I do for sure, and it was 50 plus years ago, believe it or not. And I really don't know the musicians that well, but I was in the audience at Tanglewood with my summer camp on an outing. And in the audience was a stone drunk guy that was stumbling all over the place. I was into athletics and sports. And I said, "What's wrong with this picture?" So that's how I remember going to a concert, not listening to the great music. But let me just note that as a teenager, I really did enjoy music a lot and followed a lot of musicians and concerts. The first song that Elton John had come out with back 40 years ago, My Song, I went to the Fillmore East in Greenwich Village and
Yes.
saw his first New York performance in the United States ever at that time. So that's also a memorable experience.
Well, that's a legendary venue and obviously an incredible concert to attend. So I felt like you were burying the lead for me. So there's a drunk guy staggering around. And you're like, all right, that's what I don't want to be when I grow up. Who was playing?
I didn't say who was playing. Simon and Garfunkel.
I figured you're a pro. You're like, I'm going to rope this guy in, Hartman in. I'm going to make him ass there. It was Simon and Garfunkel. Yeah.
Simon and Garfunkel.
Oh, that's okay. So those are two. Mike, I mean, I love Green Day and Dookie, but that's a tough 1-2 punch there with Elton John and Simon and Garfunkel. But Mike, let me ask you, number one, you can answer me. Was this the business? But what was your first job where you were getting a paycheck, you were paying taxes on it?
My first job was I was working at the local country club in the men's room, changing the shoes out, the spikes out for the members at the country club. I was kind of working in the locker room and cleaning up in the locker room and doing a lot of the spikes of the shoes, drilling them in, drilling them out.
There you go. Those are good skills to have.
Yeah.
All right. To finish us off on our first four, Andy, do you remember your first car, the vehicle that was yours?
Absolutely. It was called the fridge, refrigerator.
Okay.
It was the little Fiat box, 4-door, stick shift, $1,400 car that was as light that the wind could blow it off the road. But it was a brand new car that I bought, and I was actually in college at the time that I bought it. Great car. Blue, nice car. Loved driving it.
It wasn't called a box, was it? Or did it just look like a box?
But everybody called it this little refrigerator box. It had hardly any design to it. It wasn't like the Spider that they made or any other cars. It was just a functional box.
Yep. Gotcha. Well, let me start here. Andy, I want to ask you, for someone who's 4 decades in the business, your father started in 1954, you came into the business in 1978. You have seen a thing or two. I'm always a little bit cautious when I hear the term unprecedented thrown out and around, and because I feel like sometimes we kind of forget the history or we downplay the history if we weren't around for it. How would you characterize the supply chain issues, the pricing, the not quite out of the pandemic times that we're in right now? Would you characterize these as unprecedented, and why or why not?
Yeah, good question. Emotions ride high and low in our trade, and that is not unprecedented. And that is part of what, once it's in your blood, it kind of stays there. And we're lifers often in the trade of the lumber industry. So when we've had high emotions or low emotions, sometimes we've characterized those as unprecedented times, and these are crazy. And they were, whenever those occurred, for whatever reason. And Spotted Owl comes to mind as far as something that was a raging bull. This particular, it's a year later after we hit ground and thinking we were going to go below ground, and yet we soared to new altitudes. So a year of what is sustained and continued, and just seemingly building exponential problems in all of the different supply channels. I would say that this is unprecedented, and I believe that so many of the people in our trade are finding like a year in the first quarter, or just the year, and eliminate last year's first quarter. Just take that first year and just measure it against your performances in how we did as businesses in the past 10, 20, 30 years. And that will tell you that it's unprecedented.
No, I think you're bringing up a great point, Mike. I'm curious to kind of get your thought as you're working with your father, and obviously a lot of really talented people in the organization who have been around a lot of those things. This idea of emotion, and I always think of Warren Buffett when he says, when emotion takes over, get fearful when other people are greedy, and get greedy when other people are fearful. I think it really depends on who I'm speaking to and trying to understand if they're more on the greedy side or fearful. But how do you think about what we're going through now, the emotions, and how do you think about how that plays into, I think, part of Sherwood's differentiation as you guys think about risk and manage risk and use data in some different ways?
Well, it's a great question, Brad. So I'm newer to the business. I'm 38 years old. I've been in the business in Sherwood for about 6 years. It's been in my blood for my whole life.
Sure.
Previous, I was doing some other things. So the emotions are affecting me. I mean, my dad's been doing it for 40 years. He's rode these waves up and down. The market's crashing, the market's going up, the market's crashing. I've only been through this couple of cycles. So the emotions hit anytime it goes down, you really feel it. What he's saying, he's gotten used to it over 40 years. So when you're riding these emotions, you feel it every day. And when you go to sleep at night, when you wake up in the morning, you feel what the market's doing. It affects everything. And you can see as you do this for 40 years, as you see these trends, you know how to react, you know how to behave accordingly. And whether it's selling very quickly, liquidating, or holding on to your inventory, being more cautious, all these different things that come into play during the different market trends. So right now we're in a trend of very high pricing. Everyone's very nervous. What's going to happen when this all falls out? What do you do? So a lot of people are being very watching their inventory, measuring their inventory, counting it twice, having a lot less inventory, relying heavily on the middleman, the wholesaler, the broker, whoever they buy their lumber material from. What Sherwood's doing is just making sure we get closer to our customers, give as much information as possible, because just like them, every day is new to us, and we're doing our best to try to predict, but we know as much as they know, maybe a little bit more because we're closer to the mills, and we try to relay as much information as possible, try to broadcast that information, try to let everyone, all our partners know that we're there for them, we're there with them, and we're there to help navigate this together, because it is unprecedented and we have to figure this out together.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. And as we're talking to the dealers, it's on one hand, it's never had an environment when it's been easier to sell and to take care of customers, but they're also delivering a lot of bad news in that we don't have enough, or the price went up again, or a combination of both of those. The price went up and I don't have enough for you. You, in normal times on your website, it says, Sherwood Lumber, we've got you covered for all your lumber and plywood needs. Andy, what's the message for your team when we need to, and as Mike alluded to, is we need to kind of over communicate. We need to make sure we're keeping our customers close. When you've got a couple thousand customers as you do, what is your message from leadership to stay in contact even when, sometimes there is bad news to communicate?
Well, that's interesting. The communication, especially in the COVID world, where we've all changed how we communicate internally before we even do it externally, and keeping up internally while we're not sitting shoulder to shoulder with our staff. It's been that way. We have not been in our office together. So it's been all remote workforce, except to the essential workers on the front lines, delivering the material and loading and unloading the material.
Right.
We found that communication through the Zoom platforms, we have made many different programs available to our customers on invites on different topics, whether it's new products or whether it's risk management. And there's a place, if they can make the time and take an hour out of their schedule and make sure they rush to their Zoom and get their technology ready so they don't miss it and don't get all anxious that they can't connect and use a browser or not. That's the older folks have to worry about those things so much. That's as much of the anxiety as the lumber prices going higher. But that's one messaging. And we, as a group, communicate our sales group who delivers the message out to the marketplace.
Right.
We meet collectively, the entire group, 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and a Friday, and share information. And then there are the subgroups that meet frequently on a daily basis. Wow. So all of that is really a high level communication that we didn't have before COVID. We didn't share as much. And that keeps the sales force informed and being able to communicate real live news.
That's great. And Mike, I wonder if I can maybe nerd out on this just a little bit more. Why Tuesday, Thursday, Friday? And maybe if you can, is there kind of a brief agenda? How are those structured? Because I applaud your efforts, because that's one of the things we've been talking and helping many of our clients with is when the market dynamics are changing so fast, we need to, as you alluded to, Andy, is internally, we need to get in the same script. And then we need to communicate that effectively, knowing that different folks are going to receive that news differently on different platforms. Walk me through the Tuesday, Thursday, Friday schedule. What does that look like? How are they structured? And how are you keeping everybody singing from the same hymnal, if you will?
Sure. Yeah. So we use on our company Microsoft Teams, which similar to the other platforms, you can have the app on your phone. So wherever you are, you're available. I mean, if you're traveling, if you're working, you're available. You could hop on the call, which is great. Prior to this, it was dial-ins, and not everyone made the calls. It was a different scenario. Now it's like it's right there. It's easy, and anyone can do it. So whether you're a dealer, whether you're a wholesaler, and you're having these meetings, is so easy and so efficient and so quick. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, very simple. We have market meetings where all of our buyers who basically talk to the mills on a regular basis, they're bringing back the information to the broader team. So we have buyers that just focus on Doug fir. We have buyers that just focus on spruce. We have buyers that just focus on plywood. We have the buyers that just focus on southern yellow pine and some other items. So they all have, and they're talking to multiple mills every single day through the course of a day. They're also talking to certain customers. So they're really getting the vibe of the market. So we go one by one. They're giving us the headlines, what's going on, where the price is at, what's the short-term prediction, maybe a medium-sized prediction, a week or two out, maybe a month out, and what's going on in the marketplace and what kind of message you want to be bringing to your customers so they can understand what's going on and they could be informed to make their decisions appropriately. That's Tuesday and Thursday. It's very similar, but over the course of from a Tuesday to Thursday, you can have 100% reversal or 100% double of a price. It's crazy how fast things are moving. That's why we have to do it twice during the week. And then Friday's more of a reflective time of the week. Let's look back on the week. Let's talk about what happened during the week that was successful. You know, what happened with our customers, what we were able to accomplish, and we just share it with the team. It just really helps build our culture as a company. We've been doing that for a long time. But during COVID, we started doing it with the entire company, which has been very, very successful.
No, I love that. I think it's never been more important to realize on one hand, yes, we're grinding through what we're grinding through, but how can we identify what we're grateful for? What are the wins? How are we making progress? How are we staying close when we physically, for many of us, we've never been farther apart? Applaud that. Andy, let me ask you, is one thing we've been thinking a lot and trying to find creative ways is a lot of this is just really this chain of communication that might go from the mills to a wholesaler, to a dealer, to a builder, a subcontractor. And I'm always a little bit cautious when I hear folks say, listen, I just tell all my builders, I'm just a messenger. I'm just passing on this information. And I said, hey, I totally understand what you're saying. However, you got to make sure we're adding some value in such volatile times right now when the price is fluctuating so rapidly. What's your message from a leadership perspective to your team on, part of this is just communication where you're just sharing information, yet we also need you to add value and help everybody think differently. How do you help your sales team do that when they are talking to dealers?
Not quite sure how I scripted that ever, but in terms of what first comes to mind is empathy. So it's important to really be able to listen to your customer and not to be too anxious to talk to them, but to listen with the empathy. Going down the food chain, whatever pressure we have, it multiplies on their level, and it goes all the way through to the homeowner eventually.
Sure.
So it's really critical to, one, have that empathy level. Secondly, what's critical is to be the bearer of bad news in advance, because typically it should be a norm of business practice. You run by exception, it's not by the rule. So if your delivery is not going to be there, they should know that in advance. So we've always been very service oriented, and service just doesn't mean we can deliver when you want, how you want it. It's more reliable service. If it's going to be a week, it's going to be a week. It's not going to be a day. And then with the customer, the other message is that we will be there as a very valuable resource to you and your company. And it's not only just the product that we are committed to maintain, and it's not for speculation. It's labeled with your name on it. It just happens to be in visible print, but we bought it for your intent for the future. So we're stocking it for you, and you can count on us. And there's often, oh, your price is too high. And then my comment could be, would you rather me tell you that I don't have it for sale? Or would you rather at least be afforded the luxury of a high price that hopefully you can pass along?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The analogy, imperfect as it may be, is back when we were pushing $5 a gallon for gas. Yeah, maybe it's been 10, 15, I'm trying to think when that was. I knew instinctively I wasn't going to be angry at the guy who's working at 7-Eleven inside, right? I know that the gas goes up and it goes down, and when it's $2 a gallon, I'm not thanking him for his hard work to keep the prices low. It's a commodity. It goes up and down. And while I understand everyone's pain in that, I think the way you phrased that, Andy, was fantastic, is giving you the luxury of paying for this at an exorbitant price, but that's the reality of it, right? The other option is just, and some builders are, which will be fascinating to see. Some guys are saying, I was going to build 10 homes this year. I'm going to build 3 and see what happens. And you're like, hey, those are choices that we make. But Mike, let me kick this over to you as we think about communication within your team and externally to the market. One thing that I've been really impressed with Sherwood is not only the branding, but certainly social media. You guys are doing things differently. You're finding different channels to connect with, whether it's Instagram or other social media platforms to connect with folks. How do you think about leveraging those channels now that you've made the investment in a time when they're putting their ear to anything where they think they can get some data that might help them interpret what's going on? How are you leveraging social media now to communicate better to the market?
Well, thanks for noticing. I know our team is hard at work. I'm part of that team that's helping push the social media. We made a conscious decision about a year and a half ago to really be a thought leader. And that's a word that everyone uses, be a thought leader. But we really wanted to be one. We saw an opportunity in our space, in the lumber and the exterior building space, to be someone who could provide information. So we took a concerted effort to try to write articles, put information of products. Even the most simple information was not available. There was a hole, and we've tried our best to fill that over time. And I feel like we've been successful. We've been sharing a lot of information, and it's not just information about who Sherwood is and like, look at us, look what we can do.
Right.
Our intent is to help our customers. So we have a lot of articles, a lot of videos that are geared towards the dealer, explaining all the different types of lumber, all the reasons why lumber can have defects, what to think about in renovations. So these aren't things that we're necessarily doing in our business. We're doing it to help our customers. Mm-hmm. We believe it brings them value. And I would say for the dealers to do the same for their homeowner customers. It's amazing how when you're trying to help your customers rather than just like promote your own brand, how successful it is. Because I remember initially we were just touting Sherwood Lumber. Look at our products. Look what we can do. And there wasn't really a lot of feedback. And once we started helping our customers, we saw the numbers and the followers just skyrocket.
Yeah, I think on one level, we could argue that's like the insight to the obvious, and we try to do the same thing. I will tell you, acting on that insight and changing the content you're putting out is something that many in our industry have not done. So I applaud you guys for that. And I will say one of them that I have referred some of our dealer clients to share is you had a great one. And from my home building background, it really resonated with me, but it was something along the lines of, and I'm going to butcher the title, it was much more effective, but something about the 5 specific ways that builders can save money. And you kind of structurally went through and say, hey, there's 2 big, broad buckets of expenses. And I read this and I was like, yes, there are builders who are out there that are somewhat fuzzy or are not looking at these as intellectually as they can. And I think it was a perfect example of that. And I would encourage all listeners to kind of go in. It's really easy to find on your website. But the blogs I was really impressed with. So hats off to you guys there.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of the times the motivation for the inspiration for the blog posts comes from conversations I have or conversations that other salespeople have with our dealers, and they say, "Well, how do you make that lumber? Or where does that come from?" And they're like, "All right, blog post, yes." Right? Like because it doesn't. You try googling it, it doesn't exist, right? So we're trying to bring some value to the customers that does not exist out there.
Absolutely love that, and yeah, there's a good book that actually you don't need to read the 300 pages or whatever it is. It's called "They Ask, We Answer," and we talk about TAWA. They ask, we answer. If it's a pain point that one of our dealers has or a distributor has that we can help with, and we can answer that in and of its own, it's a blog post, it's a podcast topic, it's how can we share that? So I love that. Now let's take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors. You want a supplier that works for you, delivering convenience on your terms, not theirs. Boise Cascade does that by being faster, stronger, and easier. Stronger is better. From the strength of their industry-leading Versalam to their uncompromising commitment to do the right thing, you can build your business on the strength of Boise Cascade. Boise Cascade also makes a tough job easier. More than just wood, their integrated system seamlessly connects software, service, and product, all backed by a no-hassle warranty that keeps your framers, not your lawyers, no, not the lawyers, on the job. So faster, stronger, easier. It's not just what Boise Cascade does, it's who they are. I'm curious about, we talked about data just a little bit, and we talked about thinking about the market. Andy, I was impressed where, maybe you can tie this in or you can tell me how it's maybe relevant or irrelevant at this point, but lumber numbers. You guys share data that you have within your team as a subscription, and correct me if I'm wrong, either on a monthly or annual basis, that you're sharing data that you guys have to inform your decisions, that you can help dealers inform them. Maybe just talk either broadly or specifically. You can determine on advice or how you can use that data that you say, hey, we want to help dealers make better decisions about their own business. How do lumber numbers and how do other things inside of your business, how do they tie into that?
That lumber numbers is really a tool that is an analysis of each and every length and width and species in its relationship to one another.
Okay.
And so from not an emotional perspective at all, but only from a historical perspective over how the variances have been wide and narrow, those indicate certain trends that make something more obvious that you wouldn't see because you're in the trees and not in the forest.
Right.
And this brings out the forest picture to you.
Okay.
It's very broad-based, and it could be very granular all the way down to the very root. But for the purpose of having a true objective view, not what you're hearing, just simply numbers
Right.
of statistical data provides that objective decision making. And that's what it defines it's a weekly publication, which primarily is an internal one. And for the betterment of those customers that we speak with that find a really specific value, we share some of it with them. But for the most part, it's just this data that's a summary to help you guide, take the sting out of the emotion and just be objective. And it's not 50 or 40 years of the random lengths numbers are all crunched into this system.
Now, I was going to ask you about that. Wonder if we could maybe sit on this just for a minute, Andy. You've brought up, I think I was counting 3 times now, you referred to, let's take the emotion out of it. And human beings, we are emotional creatures, and that leads to some irrational behavior. I believe a big part of leadership is, regardless of what's happening, whether it's euphoric or it's down in the dumps, know that there's a steady, rational hand at the wheel. Are you able to coach your team at Sherwood or to coach your customers to help them be less emotional during such times that are seemed to designed, and in some regards, social media seems to be designed to make us more emotional?
I hope so. It's very important, only because the day of a trader is basically a day of rejection with a handful of wins.
Yeah.
And those rejections could be with wide margins or very narrow margins, but they still sting and they still hurt. And it's like getting slapped on the hand once. You got a pat on the back 17 times to make up for that one little slap on the hand. So you have to encourage them and say, it's really just this. This is what we're involved with. Many opportunities that seem that we wish we had, that we could have taken advantage of, but they didn't come to fruition. And over time, it all works out. You just got to keep on encouraging, because you're getting shot down all day long. I mean, that's the reality. So and then when it becomes too hot, and it's never as good as it seems.
Right.
It's never as bad as it seems. It's somewhere in between. But if you're deep in the minutia, you're getting much more affected. And we as a management team in these meetings, we try to level that out.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Control what you can control, and know that and life is a little bit like that. Like a lot of rejections with some really interesting and enjoyable moments where things go really well, right? I think that's well said. Mike, let me ask you, in terms of e-commerce, where do you see that going? Not only just maybe the industry at large, but also Sherwood's place in that, because what we saw in the first 90 days from about the end of March, we had about a decade's worth of e-commerce growth over a period of months. So basically, all the e-commerce that had happened in a decade prior to COVID kicking off occurred in that first 90 to 100 days. We see many of our clients are saying, okay, we were already thinking about it. We're forging ahead. We had some clients that were already all in and they're recouping the benefits. Unfortunately, we have way too many that are still like, let's just see how this whole thing plays out. I'm not sure if it's for us. Would love to just get your take on e-commerce in general in our industry.
Yeah, sure. So just like all industries, right? Other industries outside of ours, whatever makes a buy and a sell more efficient, more quick, more easy, more comfortable is going to eventually win, right? And so in other industries, there's been a mousetrap. It's been found somehow, some way. In our industry, it has yet to be found in terms of the lumber. And e-commerce for like building materials, there are some things out there. When you have a flat price that never changes, it's easier to have an e-commerce system. When you have a commodity that's fluctuating constantly and a material that's hard to ship, there hasn't quite been that solution yet. So I'm on board that if someone can figure it out appropriately, there's opportunity. People want to do this the most easy and efficient way. They just haven't figured out how to do that on a computer quite yet. There's some things out there, and they're trying, and there's been people have tried before. Sherwood Lumber is interested in participating. We want to be more involved with e-commerce, whether it's just to our customers or on a bigger picture level. But I think the technology is there. The interest level from the younger generations are there. It's just a matter of like, how do you do it? And how does it work that the fluctuating price, the hard to ship material, and the very, very vast differences of material are all part of the equation.
Yeah, for certain. And maybe we're sitting on that just for a moment. Do either of you, and this wasn't a segue, so you can either take e-commerce and slide that off, or it could be part of it. When you think about innovation in the industry, sometimes the innovation that we have is really kind of like what you referred to, which is all kind of the elements are here. It's just aligning them in a way that, to your point, reduces friction, makes it easy to gain steam and be applicable on a broader scale. In terms of innovation, as you look out for the next, say 3 to 5 years, is there anything that jumps to mind where you're saying this is something we're really watching, or we're investing in, or we're curious about, or we hope that continues? Anything on the innovation front that excites you?
Yeah, I think there's two things that come to mind. One is mass timber, particularly cross-laminated timbers, big wood constructions, whether it be homes or whether it be big multifamily. It's a lot of it's used in Europe, other countries. We haven't really quite adopted it in the U.S. yet. So it is available. There is opportunities. There's a lot of companies working on it. There's a couple mills that have created cross-laminated timber mills, mass timber mills, and it's getting a lot of traction. So I keep my eye on it. I don't know where Sherwood Lumber fits in the mix with it, but I keep my eye on it just because it's definitely a trend that we should all be paying attention to, of how homes are built and what material goes into it. And then secondly, along the same lines of how homes are built, 3D printing. There's been a couple articles of recent, a couple companies have raised some money, definitely paying attention to 3D printed homes and how that affects the building of homes. And it's definitely very interesting to see. A lot of that's getting a lot of publicity now because lumber prices are so high. So it's like, what's the alternative? And all these things are getting a lot more publicity. People are questioning, is this real? Is this the future? And I'm on that board. I just don't know, because this too shall pass. So there's high commodity pricing. So what happens after that? But I'm definitely paying close attention to both those trends.
Yeah, just this week, we had the CEO of a concrete client of ours came out and cited an investment they'd made in a startup that does 3D printing on concrete. And the video I saw, and you're seeing more of these. And again, I feel like we started seeing them almost like a decade ago, but now when you start seeing companies that in many regards are conservative and have been around for 50, 75, 100 years are doing this, you're like, okay, this could be the start of something. So great points. And I loved you kind of citing these trends that we all need to be aware of. Thanks, Mike. Andy, you've got a little bit of a longer time horizon. Anything that would either fall on both ends of the spectrum, on any innovation that you see that excites you, or does anything jump out at you as kind of rolling the eyes saying, listen, I saw this in the 80s, I saw it happen in the 90s. Anything on either end that either you want to say is, yeah, I'm not buying low on that, but this over here excites you in terms of innovation.
Yeah, there have been a lot of things that have been tried and tested. And I often reflect about our trade and how the changes in so many different trades exponentially increased from what took 50 years to 40, 30, and 20. We're fortunate in many ways in our trade that changes really haven't occurred in such a fast way at all. And that's been settling and keeping people without having to be so innovative in the same business model that, and I'll say for ourselves, for something really that's 65 plus years old, hasn't dramatically changed. I'm quite surprised to see that how we all use the convenience of our iPhones and computers to purchase and online and get information readily. It's limited in our application in our business. Although I think on the back end, it's broader in scope, as well as Mikey said, there are maybe more stable, predictable items that are non-commodity that can just be bought online and so on. But I'm quite surprised that there's been so many attempts to really make a platform that would be a trading platform, and yet we're here and we really don't have it. And then my concern to that for the business as I see it changed, the one change that is really the biggest impact that I feel is that the consolidation is really the one change over time in our trade that's significant. And it's significant to the ability for the manufacturer and the wholesaler and the customer to join in partnerships together and not to have supply channels. So with that said, the need to be sourcing a variety of commodity items in the marketplace, it's just a shrinking audience of who you can buy from and who you can sell to. And so much of it is now becoming more controlled in contractual agreements that the bid and ask part of the trade is no longer there. And the number of customers aren't necessarily, they're not prospecting to grow. They're prospecting to engage with the big elephants in the room.
And I'd like to ask you, is this what I would describe as this fever of acquisition and the consolidation that we have seen over the past, call it 18 months, but has been certainly a trend over the last several years, more heatedly, I'll say. Is this new? In your mind, is this a different speed at which this is happening or a different intensity because of maybe demographics? Or are you saying hey, yeah, it's consolidation and acquisitions are hot right now. However, this, like most things in our business, this is cyclical and this too shall pass.
I think we were on the sidelines for a long period of time, certainly at the wholesale and certainly at the manufacturing side.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's passing. I think we're just coming of age as so many other industries went through this phase already.
Right.
And the Walmarts are there and they dominated and it's taken the place of so much. And we didn't. And so our space at the wholesale end still has a lot of consolidation to be had. And at the retail end, it's a continuation. I mean, the scale, it's a proven model. I mean, it's working. The CVS's, they took over the lumber yard in the town near the railroad. So that it will be here.
Love it. Well, again, I'm watching the time, and I appreciate you guys making time. I am aware of the fact that it is late in the day for me, and you are 1 hour ahead of me. So again, really appreciative there. Maybe this is more of a personal question. I'm always trying to learn more and improve. Maybe, Mike, I'll start with you. I'm not sure if I gave you any heads up on this, but you guys are very agile on your feet here. I'm curious, in terms of books, would you have any book that you would recommend that you think is particularly relevant to these times that we're in right now, or a recent book that you'd recommend? And then, Andy, I'll kick it over to you. I'm curious, is there a book that you said maybe most has impacted your life? Wide open book recommendation, Mike. Take that any way you want.
All right. I don't read a lot, unfortunately, but I do have some books that I have read in my past, and I do some audiobooks now as well.
Sure.
Who Moved My Cheese?
Okay.
I forget who writes the book. We could Google that in a second, but it's basically about being creative and thinking outside the box. And I think times like this, times when things are volatile, times when things are different, when you don't really know what to do, you just gotta. There really isn't a playbook. There are people who've gone through tough times before and challenging times, and you could rely on them.
Yeah.
But there's no playbook, so you got to think outside the box. You got to do something different, do something new, and be confident, be strong that no one's gone through it, and this is new, and we're all going through it together. So have people to lean on, have people to get answers from, and be creative.
No, I think it's good, and that's an extremely short book. And I think about myself. I have it. And I'm like, yeah, I remember when I read it. And I was like, I remember I had to do it when we were working for a big corporation. We all had to read it. And I was kind of rolling my eyes. And then I think this is one of those books that you should read every couple of years, because the fundamental principle of how we handle change in our lives, that's evergreen, man. That is going to be valuable to be able to say, okay, I have a mental framework, how to handle change. And I don't know, whenever we arrive at stasis and things stop changing, I'm pretty sure that only happens when we're dead. So love that.
Brad, thanks for calling out the short book, because that's I don't, like I said, I don't read too much. Short books.
Short books. Just this week, somebody said, I liked your book. There was short words, short sentences, not many pages, and pictures for every chapter. I said, there you go. Let's keep it simple. Andy, when I asked the question, we started with Mike, you got up and left the room. So did you go find something? I'm very curious now. What did you find? What book recommendation might you have for us?
So, like Mikey, my novel reading is limited to short books and periodicals, particularly all kinds of different websites of articles that are on the alert basis.
Sure.
But just going back to Who Moved the Cheese, I think I'm trying to think of the author who he's read. I've read a lot of his short books.
Yeah, I'm blanking.
But another short book that came to mind was Getting the Monkey Off Your Back. I forget exactly the title, but I think it's the same author.
Is that the 5 Minute Manager series?
A 5 Minute Manager, same author, and Getting the Monkey Off Your Back. And today, multitasking and continuing being somewhat interrupted, if you will, between the technology beeps on your computer as we're talking, my cell phone, and all those things. Trying to stay within the parameters of being in a single lane and being focused. Mm-hmm. So I think you can't take everything on. You got to be able to say no. And that's kind of what I took from that.
No, that's great. Well, I'm just curious, as you think about your media consumption diet, online, off, anywhere, does anything come to the top of your mind when you are getting alert, Andy, that you're saying, this is where I get a lot of the bang for the buck that I know I can rely on that's insightful or helpful to you on a day-to-day basis?
There isn't any one specific. Okay. I just think that in general, certainly speaking to different people in different parts of the world and different parts of the trade, alerts and just whatever you find interesting are a talking piece and of interest that may be in somebody else's world. Mm-hmm. So I find it just, rather than being a newspaper that I have to channel down to one section, this gives me just an easy cross read of different interests from sports to business.
Yep. All right. Well, gentlemen, again, thank you so much. I was really excited to talk to you now, just with everything going on right now. You guys were the perfect set of guests to have on the show. I appreciate you making time. I know it's late. Thank you very much and appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you. Thanks for including us. We enjoy your show and you've got a great growing audience that is excited about what you bring out. So thank you.
And Brad, I'll just
Appreciate that.
offer for any of your listeners out there, when you're listening to this, if you have questions about the lumber business, about the lumber pricing, if you're nervous or what to do next, I'd love to help answer your questions. And there's a whole team behind me within Sherwood Lumber that has that are veterans in terms of price knowledge and the emotions like we talked about. So and drop us a line. We'd love to help.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at that, and I just think the subscription business in general, I think we're going to see over the next several years at every level, from dealers to builders, are going to think differently about, like we have in our personal lives, about this subscription business. We're just paying monthly and we're getting all this additional value. When I saw lumber numbers there, I can't think of a better time to be curious. And I think off the bat, it was like $125 or $150 a month or something, correct?
Yep, yeah, that's about it. Yeah, and it takes all the emotion out.
It'd be a no-brainer. So, gentlemen, thanks again. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad. Have a good weekend.
All right, how did that go? Hopefully you found my conversation with Andy Goodman and Mike Goodman of Sherwood Lumber to be worth your time and attention. I really enjoyed talking to them and learned a lot from them. Now, on this Behind Your Back podcast, our goal is to make this the best podcast you listen to. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, ideas for future shows, ideas for potential guests, or any sales fundamentals issues you're struggling with your team, whether it's your boss as a sales leader or as a leader with your sales reps, or if you're struggling with any sort of customer or builder scenarios, we would love to hear about them. We would love to take that burden on, think intelligently, and give you some ideas in an upcoming episode. It's going to be titled Asking for a Friend. So we're looking to solicit some real world examples that we can put our minds to and hopefully give you some unique perspectives and some solutions after we do our homework. If you're into that sort of thing, email me at bradley@behindyourbacksales.com. Again, bradley@behindyourbacksales.com. You can link up with me on LinkedIn or connect on Instagram at behindyourbackceo. I want to say thank you to our sponsors before we go. Materials Exchange. What E-Trade is for the stock market, Materials Exchange is to the LBM industry. They make commodity pricing transparent. They make buying simple, and the fees are low. You can register today and use the promo code Bradley, BRADLEY, to get your first trade free. There you go. Zero risk. And what better time to get better understanding of pricing in the market? I cannot think of a more recent time where this is more relevant. So check that out. Also, thank you to Boise Cascades Engineered Wood Products and their innovative Sawtech technology by visiting bc.com/EWP. We're going to close out like we always do. You, my friend, you are owed nothing. Deliver value first.